Welcome to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. I'm Zaki Baruti, and I want to welcome you in to our program for this evening. It's going to be an exciting evening. I have an exciting guest. And but before we have our program, I'd like to just give a shout out to my biological family, as well as the Universal African Peoples Organization family, as well as to New Life Evangelistic Center, Reverend Rice, and all of the people who are working behind the cameras, Bill, Bob, James. How's everybody doing? Go tell a friend or family member that Conversations with Zaki Baruti is on. At this time, I'm very proud to have in studio with me the sheriff. The sheriff is in town. How you doing there, Sheriff Vernon Betts?
Glad to see you today. How are you?
All right, I'm great. I'm great. You know, as you was coming, one of my popular songs back in the day in terms of out of Jamaica, what was it? I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy. Right. And I think at that time you was the deputy, so here you are. No, I'm just messing around.
But I didn't shoot the sheriff.
You did? I know, that's right. Again, just welcome here into the studio with me. Before we really get into some of the real deep issues that your office have to deal with, I always like to share with the audience something about the person who's my guest.
Yeah.
You know, that background information and what have you. So would you share with our listening audience, our viewing audience, something about yourself?
My background? Well, yeah, Zaki. Well, I'm a St. Louis boy, born and raised, if I can say it like that. Went to Beaumont High School. Very proud of my Beaumont High School. Got a couple of other fellows, if I call those names, like Judge Ronnie White or Richard Gray. Those are all my classmates.
Oh, okay. You was kind of hanging out with some folks.
Other names that you'd recognize around the city. But I went to Beaumont High School, graduated from Beaumont High School, went to Harris Teachers College. Did my years at Harris Teachers College, and then began to teach school, and I was a St. Louis public school teacher for 6 years.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, taught here in St. Louis public schools.
What school?
I taught at a couple of schools. I taught at Yateman, taught at Mallinckrodt, South St. Louis, taught at Hickey, and so I taught at several schools. Left teaching after about 6 years. I got hired at Union Electric, as we know now, Ameren.
Right.
And so I went from teaching to the corporate life. Did 30 years at Ameren, worked my way up, retired as a supervisor in the information technology function. After doing 30 years at Ameren, I then sat at home for a year, retired, just enjoyed life, got restless, was going to go back to teaching, and my brother talked me into going to the St. Louis Sheriff's Department. And so that's another whole story.
So we want to hear that story also, but also in terms of family life, are you a family man?
Sure I am. I have a beautiful wife, Lori, and I have 5 kids, 3 grandchildren, and so a lot of hoopla, a lot of action around the house with the grandkids, but they're all a lot of fun. And then my kids, my baby girl. Everybody's working and doing well, but my baby girl's the last one that's left in school, and she's down at Georgia State on a full scholarship, and we're just tickled to death about her and stuff. So yeah, we have a wholesome family, a lot of cousins and relatives in town, and I have a sister who's older. I have 2 brothers who are younger, and so. Couple of nieces and nephews in town. So.
Well, you know what, in terms of, before we take a break, when we deal with family life, and you made mention of being a grandfather, just share the importance of being a grandfather, you know, in terms of your own experience.
Well, one of the things, Zaki, is amazing you mentioned that being a grandfather, usually you're going to spend time with the grandchild. And you have an opportunity to just insert some attitude, some character. You can be an influence in that grandchild, and probably the parent of that grandchild in my house always seem to want something. So there's always, Dad, can you do this for me? Dad, can you do that? Along with the babysitting part of it, which I said I would never do. And now it seems like when that grandson or those grandchildren not there, I'm always asking, where are they?
I know that's right. And being a grandfather myself, that has been one of the great experiences of life. And, my nieces and nephews always say that, be quiet, old man. I always say, now my young children keep me young. I'm a young man.
Yeah.
So anyway, to that level. You went into the sheriff department after retiring. And what is the responsibility of the sheriff department here in the city of St. Louis?
Well, the prime responsibility is for the sheriffs to protect the 22nd Judicial District of the state of Missouri. St. Louis in and of itself is a judicial district, the 22nd Judicial District. And so in common language, anybody coming into the two court buildings, the civil court or the Cornahan building, it's my responsibility to make sure that our judges, our lawyers, our citizens, and then even our inmates are well served and protected as they use those services in those buildings. That's sort of the primary responsibility. Then we have several other functions. Of course, we transport prisoners.
Right.
We serve papers.
Okay.
Any judgments coming from the courts, that'll be carried out by St. Louis Sheriff Deputy. Okay,
can you hold that thought, because we'll have to take a break and we'll come back on those points.
Sure.
Welcome back to Conversations with Zaki Baruti, with your host, Zaki Baruti, and here in studio with me is the sheriff. The sheriff is in town, Brother Vernon Betts, and we were on the other side of the break speaking of some of the responsibilities of the sheriff department. First of all, where is the civic court building and the Carnahan building located?
The civil court building faces Tucker, right at Tucker and Market. And then the Carnahan building faces Market, and it also is right at the corner of Tucker and Market, but it faces Market. And so the two big buildings, you can tell the difference. The civil court building is the one that looks like the pyramid at the top.
Oh, okay.
And then the Carnahan building is the one that has the two statues on each side of the steps. So that's how we kind of distinguish when we're kind of describing those buildings here in St. Louis.
Okay, and with that said, on the flip side, a couple other points, I think, in terms of the responsibilities of the sheriff. You want to just highlight that?
Yeah, reiterate. Yeah. When you come to those buildings, you're going to come in and you're going to find there's going to be some guys in the brown uniforms, sheriff deputies. There's 164 sheriff deputies as we speak, and you're going to have my security unit.
And you're responsible for the administration of 164 deputies. Am I correct?
That's right.
And do you have any administrative staff also?
I should have, but the way things are going right now, I've been in office for 2 months, and I haven't been able to hire my administrative staff.
And we want to get into reasons why you have not. But I just want people to have a clear understanding of the sheriff's responsibilities as well as who you administer. So you're saying 164 plus some staff which you have not been able to be accessible to. So in terms of so that's all of the responsibilities that we have looked at, right? So,
basically, yeah.
Okay, then. Yeah. Now, your brother motivated you to go into this field.
To come to
So how long had you been the sheriff? And then what motivated you to become a candidate for a sheriff?
For the position of sheriff.
Yeah.
Well, I was a sheriff deputy for 3 years, and you mentioned my brother. I have a brother that's been a deputy down there for 10 years, and after I retired from Ameren, sat at home, got restless, I said, well, I'm going to go back to work. I have my lifetime certification to teach in the state of Missouri. Of course, they don't give lifetime certifications anymore, but I was going to go back to teaching, and my brother looks at me, he says, forget about those bad kids, come on down here, we don't do nothing. And so the do nothing part kind of appealed to me. I kind of thought he was joking, but when I actually got hired there in 2008 and I got there, A lot of those guys walked around doing nothing. So I started working at the sheriff department in 2008. Didn't care a whole lot for what I saw. Coming from Ameren, where things were extremely proficient, you were efficient, you had to cross all your T's and dot your I's. I came to the sheriff department, and it was almost like going to a three-ring circus.
Wow. So who was head of the sheriff department at that time when you came in? And you sound like it was very disorganized and what have you, and not really functioning well.
Right. Well, when I got there, my observation, it was very disorganized, and everybody knows that Mr. Murphy, Jim Murphy, was the sheriff at that time. I worked there my first year, and I didn't see Mr. Murphy at all, so I don't know where he was all those times. But I was busy working. Maybe he was somewhere. But the place was so disorganized, and I became disgruntled right off the bat. At 2 months on the job, I told my mother, I said, no, this isn't going to work. This isn't the place for me. It's just too much mess going on. And Zaki, my mother, looked at me, and she's, bless her heart, she's just passed away last Friday. She's no longer with us, but she looked at... And
we extend our deepest
sympathy, and thank you. But she looked at me, she said, wait a minute, son, wait a minute. I prayed about this, and somebody there needs you. You're not working for the money. Stay there and make a difference. And so I went on, kind of shook my head. My mother, I said to myself, she don't realize how bad the place is. But I went on, I worked for 4 more months. I was there for 6 months. I told my wife, the only way I can make a difference, I need to be the sheriff. And that, there's so much that needs to be changed around here. We need somebody in that position that's got some leadership and some know-how and can change that place. And so my wife and I actually argued for about a week. She says, politics, no way, no way, And so I told her, but if we're going to make a difference, and that's all I want to do is make a difference.
So in making that difference, then, you decided to run for sheriff in what year?
In 2008.
In 2008.
Well, I take it back. I made my decision to run in 2009. Mm-hmm. And then the election for sheriff came up in 2012. So I had that 3 years to start campaigning and all that. So I campaigned from 2009 to 2012. The election came up in 2012. And of course, not knowing anything about politics, my first time ever being involved in politics other than voting. Of course, I voted every election here in the city of St. Louis. But as far as knowing how to run a campaign and the strategies and all that, I did the best that I could. I got the people that I thought could help me, and we came close. But of course, closeness only helps in horseshoes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then you lost by a very slim margin, am I correct?
Yes. I lost in 2012 by only a 2% margin.
Wow.
My first time out.
Wow. So with that loss, you motivated now to rerun.
Yes.
And here you are with us as the sheriff.
As the sheriff.
First of all, let me congratulate you again.
Thank you again.
Now, as you advocated for different changes within the sheriff department, and we want to look at what are you advocating and how do you see yourself making that difference as your mother prayed. And what we're going to do is on the flip side of the break, we're going to come back there and we'll look at the changes that you're proposing in the spirit of your mother.
Thank you.
All right. Welcome back to Conversations with Zaki Baruti, your host, Zaki Baruti, and here in studio with me is the sheriff. The sheriff is in town.
Okay? New sheriff in town.
The new sheriff in town. Okay, then. Right. On that note, we were speaking of, first of all, your mother had prayed and said that you were needed in the sheriff department. You were blessed to win in this last election, and you've been in office for how long?
I've been in office for 2 months now.
2 months, okay.
This month starts my 3rd month.
Okay, then. Now, you went into the office with high expectations, am I correct?
Yes, I did.
And what are the items that you would like to see accomplished as the...
Well, Zaki, when I campaigned on a couple of premises. One, that I wanted to go into the sheriff department and I wanted to make it a safer place to work. And that was the number one issue in talking with the judges at that time, that they felt with all the stuff going on in Ferguson and around the city, around the country, we needed to come in, and our first objective should be to make the court buildings a safer place. So that's what we've been doing. We've been looking at some issues and some programs and things that we can make the court safer. The second most important thing to me was the lack of morale that existed in the department. When I was working there, I saw, because of the way that the employees were treated, the lack of promotions, the lack of pay was a big issue. You had guys who had been there for 10 years making more money than guys who had been there for 20 years. When we did our research, as I was campaigning, I found that every black officer, if he was a sergeant, he made less than the white officer sergeant. And all the way up the line, black lieutenant, less than the white lieutenant. And so there was a real serious morale problem. Of course, the department had been sued in 2000, and in 2006 had been sued for racism. You had that racial tone going on, and I wanted to change all that. Now besides making the place safer, dealing with the employees and the morale, we need to overhaul every system. Is kind of outdated, antiquated. And so efficiency coming from Ameren to the sheriff department was like going from flying an airplane to riding a horse. If I can say.
Wow.
So the place needs to be upgraded in most of its systems and stuff, and to use more modern technology. We can get better use out of the computer and those kind of systems.
Okay, then. So those are some worthwhile. Basically, I'm hearing out of your conversation in terms of making the place more safer for everyone,
right? As
well as in dealing with some of the racial injustices that had to occur. Now, a question for you real quick. You say there's 164 deputies. Of that number, racially, what was the percentages, black and white?
Two-thirds white.
Two-thirds white. Here in a city that's 50% black, they say at least, am I right? Or close, probably 60%.
Yeah. Last count I got, 52% of the city is African American.
Okay, then. So that's a clear example from our perspective as an organization that we're not getting our fair share of the economic returns of our tax dollars.
You're right.
Here. So you would agree to that then?
I would agree.
Okay, then. Now, how do the sheriffs, how are they chosen? I mean, not the sheriffs, the deputies.
The deputies.
Right. How are they chosen?
Well, the sheriff's department over the years has basically worked off a patronage system, meaning that the sheriff would have folks who would help him, committeemen, committeewomen, aldermen, folks like that, when it's time to be elected, would help him get reelected. And then in turn, they would send him people for employment, and he would then hire folks, and that's considered our patronage system. The problem with that under this last administration, and I'm not totally against the patronage system, but you got to still hire people who are qualified.
Absolutely.
And they were not hiring people who were qualified, and that's some of the problem that I saw when I got hired there.
Yeah, well, to that end, we appreciate your vision for making this racially equitable. But also, we got to go to break, and on the flip side, I want to deal with the kinds of issues you're facing as the new sheriff.
Thank you. Okay.
Welcome back to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. In studio with me is the new sheriff in town, Vernon Betts. And on the previous side of our break, you would look at laying out some of the responsibilities and some of the issues that you have to face with in terms of racial equity and what have you, and making the court safer. But as the new sheriff, have you been welcomed by the judges to whom you provide safety for, or how have they reacted to your new position?
Well, Zaki, we started out, I thought, first day or two we would get off to a great start, but the judges would like to control the sheriff's department. They have a bill in place, House bill, Senate bill 484, which would in turn give them the power to make this an appointed position. So they got that in place already. They are attempting to control the sheriff department even as we speak. I've not been able to hire my executive staff.
And your executive staff is how many people?
Just about 3 people.
About 3 people, and you have, and that's an important component of making your department run efficiently. Right, I would assume, right?
Of course, yeah. Any company needs a core of people that's going to make the decisions for the company.
Now, in terms of them proposing the bill, and we don't have to have you back for our program because we just need to go a little deeper in terms of all the issues that you're having to deal with. But in terms of the number of judges that you are to protect, how many of that, and all of them on board with this new bill? And that did not occur under Jim Murphy, right? The previous white sheriff.
No, they made an attempt to present this bill 2 years ago when Mr. Murphy made a decision that he was going to retire. They tried Senate Bill 527 and it didn't go anywhere. So now they're back again trying to get control of the sheriff department. Now, you know, they took control of the circuit clerk's office. And from my understanding, that's not running real well. But it seems to me these judges just want the power to control everything going on in the courts.
Okay, then. So with that, I'm so sorry that we, kind of rushing through. We don't have to, as I said again, have you in for part 2, part 3, so that our people are really clear on what is taking place in the sheriff department. And once again, I just want to welcome you.
Thank you.
And thank you for being the new sheriff, the new sheriff in town.
Thank you, sir.